The razor blade sits on her pillow. Sarah doesn't touch it. Doesn't move. Just stares at the thin piece of metal catching fluorescent light, placed precisely in the center of her worn pillowcase where her head had been 20 minutes ago during morning count. Someone was in her cell. While she stood in line. While guards watched. While cameras recorded. Someone walked in and left a message that doesn't need translation. Her cellmate, Ray, stands in the doorway. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't need to. They've shared 8 square meters for 3 months, and Ray's silence right now tells Sarah everything she needs to know. Ray knew this was coming. Maybe even knew it would be today. Sarah picks up the razor blade with 2 fingers, feels its weight, and looks at Ray directly for the first time since lights on. Who? Ray's eyes flick to the corridor, then back. You're asking the wrong question. What's the right question? Whether you're stupid or suicidal. Sarah wraps the blade in toilet paper and flushes it. The metal disappears, but the threat doesn't. Both women know that. The blade wasn't the point. The point was access. The point was, we can reach you whenever we want. They walk to breakfast in silence. Sarah maps every face in the corridor, every set of eyes that won't meet hers. The prison has been quiet the past week. Not peaceful quiet. Waiting quiet. Like everyone knows something she doesn't. In the cafeteria line, the woman serving scrambled eggs holds Sarah's gaze for a beat too long. The eggs land on her tray with a wet slap. Sarah finds a seat against the wall, back to concrete, where she can see the room. Across the cafeteria, in the corner where the lifers sit, a woman with gray-streaked hair and tattoos covering both arms watches Sarah eat. The woman doesn't blink. Doesn't look away when Sarah stares back. Just sits there with her hands folded on the table, making sure Sarah knows she's being evaluated. That's when Sarah understands. Whatever she did, whatever line she crossed, it happened without her knowing. And in a place like this, ignorance isn't protection. It's ammunition. The cafeteria empties in waves. C block first, then B block, then administrative segregation escorts. Sarah is A block, last to leave, last to return. She walks with her hands visible, posture neutral, eyes forward. Prison teaches you to move like water. Don't draw attention. Don't show fear. Don't trust the quiet. But when she rounds the corner toward A block, 3 guards are pulling someone out of a cell. The inmate is screaming, but not in English. Raw sounds that don't need language. The guards move efficiently, mechanical, like they've done this 1,000 times. They probably have. Sarah recognizes the woman. DS. A block, 4 cells down. 48 hours ago, Diaz was fine. Now she's being dragged to isolation with blood running from her nose and blank eyes that don't see anything anymore. The guard supervising the extraction glances at Sarah. Not a warning. Not a threat. Just acknowledgement. Like, you're watching this because you're supposed to watch this. Like, learn. Sarah enters her cell. The door locks behind her with a sound that used to feel like security, but now feels like confinement. Ray is already there, sitting on the lower bunk, reading a Bible she doesn't believe in. Diaz talked to you 3 days ago, Ray says without looking up. Commissary line. You talked back. Sarah's mind rewinds. 3 days ago. Commissary. Diaz had asked about Sarah's sentencing, about her lawyer, about whether the public defender had actually shown up for trial. Normal questions. Inmate small talk. Nothing that felt dangerous. She asked about my case. I answered. Ray closes the Bible. She asked about your case because someone told her to ask about your case. Why? Because your case shouldn't exist. Sarah sits on the edge of her bunk. The concrete floor is cold against her feet. Explain. Ray looks at the door, then at the ceiling, then at Sarah with eyes that have seen too much. Your conviction doesn't make sense. Everyone knows it. 3-year sentence for embezzlement, but you worked in a daycare. No financial access. No evidence. No motive. Your trial lasted 2 days. Public defender never called witnesses. You took a plea that was worse than going to trial. So, in here, that means you're either very stupid or you're hiding something. And you're not stupid. Sarah wants to argue, wants to explain that sometimes the system just breaks you down until you don't have the energy to fight, until taking the plea feels like the only way to make it stop. But she doesn't say any of this because Ray isn't finished. The women on this block think you took a fall for someone important. They think you're either protected, which makes you dangerous, or you're vulnerable, which makes you useful. I'm neither. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what they believe. Ray opens the Bible again, running her finger down a page she's not reading. The razor blade was a test. They wanted to see if you'd panic, if you'd report it, if someone would protect you. You didn't panic. No one protected you. That tells them something. What does it tell them? Ray doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. Sarah can feel the answer in the air, in the silence, in the way the walls seem to press closer. It tells them she's alone. Sarah doesn't sleep that night. Lies on her bunk staring at the ceiling while Ray snores softly below, and listens to the sounds of the prison at night. Toilets flushing. Women crying in cells they think are soundproof. The occasional burst of laughter that sounds wrong at 2 a.m. The shuffle of guards making rounds, flashlights sweeping through the bars. At 3:17 a.m., footsteps stop outside their cell. Sarah holds her breath. The flashlight beam crosses the ceiling, pauses, then moves on. The footsteps continue. Sarah exhales slowly. In the morning, everything looks different. Not visibly different. Same gray walls. Same scratched floors. Same faces in the breakfast line. But the atmosphere has shifted. Women who usually ignore Sarah now watch her openly. Conversations stop when she approaches. The woman with the gray streaked hair and arm tattoos is sitting in the same corner, hands folded in the same position, staring with the same unblinking intensity. Sarah takes her tray to an empty table near the vending machines. Eats alone. Doesn't look up. A shadow falls across her table. Sarah's hand tightens on her plastic spork, but she keeps eating. The shadow doesn't move. Finally, Sarah looks up. The woman standing over her is young, maybe 25, with a scar running from her left eye to her jaw. Her name is Keys. Everyone knows Keys. She's the one who runs commissary trades, who settles disputes, who delivers messages that can't be delivered officially. Cortez wants to talk, Keys says. Cortez. The woman with the gray hair and the tattoos. The one who's been watching. Sarah had hoped she was wrong about who was behind the razor blade. She wasn't. When? Now. Sarah sets down her spork carefully. Follows Keys across the cafeteria. Every woman in the room watches them walk. Some with curiosity. Some with pity. No one intervenes. Cortez's table is in the corner, positioned so she can see both entrances. Two other women sit with her, but they stand up as Sarah approaches, giving Cortez and Sarah the illusion of privacy in a room full of witnesses. Sarah sits without being invited. Prison rule: if you show fear, you've already lost. Cortez studies Sarah for a long moment. Up close, her tattoos tell stories. Prison ink. Names. Dates. Symbols that mean something to people who speak that language. You know who I am, Cortez says. Not a question. Yes. Then you know I don't waste time. Cortez leans forward slightly. Your case is wrong. Your conviction is wrong. That means someone outside these walls wanted you inside them. I need to know why. Sarah meets Cortez's eyes steadily. I don't know why. I don't believe you. Doesn't change the answer. Cortez smiles, but there's no warmth in it. The truth is going to come out. Either you tell me, or someone makes you tell them. You get to choose which one happens. There's nothing to tell. Then you're going to have a very hard time in here. Sarah stands up. Walks away. Feels Cortez's eyes on her back the entire way across the cafeteria. Feels every other pair of eyes watching to see if Cortez stops her. She doesn't. But Sarah knows this isn't over. It's just beginning. Back in her cell, Ray is gone. Her bunk is stripped. Her belongings are boxed and stacked by the door. A guard Sarah doesn't recognize is standing in the corridor. Where's Ray? Sarah asks. Transferred, the guard says. You've got a new cellmate. She'll be here after count. Sarah's stomach drops. Ray was neutral. Ray was safe. Whoever they are moving in next won't be either of those things. The new cellmate arrives during evening recording. Sarah is sitting on her bunk, staring at nothing, when the door unlocks. A woman walks in carrying a mesh bag of belongings. She's older, maybe 50, with weathered skin and eyes that look like they've forgotten how to trust anything. "I'm Foster," the woman says, dumping her bag on Ray's former bunk. "You're Sarah. How long have you been here?" Sarah asks. "In this prison? 11 years. In this cell? 5 minutes." Foster starts unpacking with methodical efficiency. "I know why they moved me. Same reason they moved your last cellmate out. Someone wants information, and they think you're going to give it to someone." "I don't have information." Foster stops unpacking and looks at Sarah directly. "Then you better figure out what someone thinks you know. Because whatever they're looking for, they're not going to stop looking." That night, Sarah lies awake again. Foster sleeps on the bunk below, breathing steady and even. Sarah wonders if Foster is really asleep or just pretending. Wonders if Foster was moved here to watch her, to report back to Cortez, to push her toward some breaking point. The next morning, Sarah goes to the library during her rec hour. The prison library is small, mostly donated paperbacks and outdated textbooks, but it has 2 computers for legal research. Sarah logs into the system and starts searching for information about her own case. Trial transcripts. Evidence logs. Anything that might explain why someone would frame her. The documents are thin. Too thin. Her public defender had barely filed anything. The prosecution's case was built on testimony from a single witness, her supervisor at the daycare. A woman named Linda Morrison who claimed Sarah had been stealing from petty cash for months. Sarah remembers the trial in fragments. Morrison sitting on the witness stand, crying, saying she trusted Sarah and felt so betrayed. The prosecutor asking leading questions. Sarah's defender barely objecting. The judge looking bored. The jury convicting after 40 minutes of deliberation. But looking at the transcripts now, something stands out. Morrison's testimony includes specific details about bank deposits Sarah allegedly made. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers. How would Morrison know that unless she had access to Sarah's banking records? Sarah prints the relevant pages. Folds them small. Slips them into her waistband. When she returns to her cell, Foster is sitting on the lower bunk, reading a magazine. Doesn't look up when Sarah enters. Doesn't acknowledge her. But Sarah can feel the attention, the waiting. That afternoon, during yard time, Keys approaches again. Cortez wants an answer. Tell her I don't have one. That's the wrong answer. It's the only answer. Keys steps closer, lowering her voice. You think you're tough because you're not backing down. But tough doesn't matter in here. Smart matters. And right now, you're being stupid. Sarah watches a group of women playing basketball on the cracked concrete court. Their laughter sounds forced, performative. Everyone in this yard is performing some version of themselves. Sarah included. If Cortez wanted me hurt, I'd be hurt already, Sarah says quietly. She wants something else. She's trying to figure out if I'm worth protecting or worth eliminating. That's why she's applying pressure. She's seeing how I react. Key's expression shifts slightly. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. So you do understand how this works. I'm learning. Then learn this. Cortez doesn't have infinite patience. You've got maybe 48 hours before she stops asking nicely. Keys walks away. Sarah stands alone near the fence, watching the guard towers, watching the razor wire catching afternoon sun, watching women move through carefully choreographed routines that look like recreation but feel like survival. Foster appears beside her. Doesn't say anything. Just stands there, present. Finally, Sarah speaks. What do you know about Morrison? Linda Morrison. Foster's voice is careful, neutral. She worked here. 4 years ago. Corrections officer. Got fired for misconduct. Sarah's blood runs cold. What kind of misconduct? The kind that involved helping inmates move contraband. She did 6 months in county. Got out. Disappeared. Foster glances at Sarah sideways. Why? She was the witness who testified against me. Foster goes very still. Then, quietly, you need to talk to Cortez. Tonight. Why? Because if Morrison put you in here, someone outside wanted you inside very badly. And Cortez has spent 11 years building a network that reaches outside these walls. If anyone can find out why Morrison framed you, it's her. Foster pauses. But you need to offer her something in return. I don't have anything to offer. Everyone has something. Foster meets Sarah's eyes. Figure out what yours is before someone decides you're worth more dead than alive. Sarah requests a meeting with Cortez through official channels. The request is denied. She tries again through unofficial channels, passing a message through keys. That request goes unanswered. 2 days pass. The pressure builds. Women who used to ignore Sarah now deliberately bump into her in corridors. Her commissary orders are lost. During shower time, the hot water cuts off when it's her turn. Small violations. Testing boundaries. Seeing how much she'll tolerate before breaking. Foster watches it all from a careful distance. Offers no help. Offers no advice. Just observes, like Sarah is an experiment with a predetermined outcome. On the third day, Sarah finds a note slipped under her dinner tray. 6 words in cramped handwriting. Midnight. Chapel. Come alone. Cortez. The prison chapel is technically off-limits after lights out, but Sarah knows guards who can be convinced to look the other way. At 11:47 p.m., she tells Foster she's going to the bathroom. Foster doesn't acknowledge her. The corridors are dark except for emergency lighting. Sarah moves through shadows, testing each step, listening for guard boots. The chapel door is unlocked. She slips inside. Cortez is sitting in the front pew, backlit by a dim security light. Alone. Sarah scans the room quickly. No one else visible. But that doesn't mean they're alone. Sarah sits 2 rows behind Cortez. Waits. Finally, Cortez speaks. You checked your case files. Found the Morrison connection. That was smart. You've been watching my computer usage. I watch everything. Cortez turns to face Sarah. Linda Morrison didn't just frame you. She framed 17 other women over a 6-year period. All small-time charges. All cases that shouldn't have gone to conviction. All defendants who took plea deals because their public defenders convinced them it was their best option. Sarah's mind races. Why? Prison labor. Specifically, the private companies that contract with prisons for manufacturing work. Those companies need a certain number of workers to fulfill contracts. When inmate populations drop, those companies lose money. So they created a pipeline. Morrison was one part of it. Public defenders who discouraged trials were another part. Judges who pushed harsh sentences were the third part. That's conspiracy. That's capitalism. Cortez stands, moving closer. I've been collecting evidence for 3 years. Documenting the pattern. Recording conversations. Getting inmates to sign affidavits. I've almost got enough to go to the federal prosecutors. But there's a problem. What problem? Someone outside knows I'm building a case. They know I'm close. And they're trying to figure out who's helping me. Cortez stops directly in front of Sarah. The razor blade was a test, but not the test you thought. It was meant for whoever would help you. To see if anyone in this prison would step forward and protect you. No one did. That told them you're not connected to me. Sarah's throat tightens. So why am I here? Because now that they've confirmed you're not working with me, they're going to use you as bait. Cortez's voice drops. Morrison didn't frame you randomly. You worked at a daycare owned by a woman named Catherine Vale. Vale is married to a man who sits on the state prison board. He's the one coordinating the pipeline. Morrison testified against you specifically because your conviction would give Vale a reason to visit you here. She's going to come in a few days, pretend to offer help, and try to extract information about whether you've talked to anyone inside about your case. Why would I have information? You wouldn't. But Vale doesn't know that. She just knows Morrison's testimony was sloppier than usual. That some of the details don't add up. She's worried you might have figured out the connection and talked to the wrong people. Cortez pauses. When Vale visits, you're going to tell her exactly what she wants to hear. You're going to say you've been approached by an inmate asking questions about your case. You're going to describe that inmate as someone who matches my cellmate's description. Sarah's blood goes cold. You want me to set up your cellmate? My cellmate has been feeding information to the guards for 6 months. She's a plant. She thinks she's reporting to administration about petty rule violations. She doesn't know she's being used to monitor me. Cortez's expression doesn't change. When Vale hears that someone matching my cellmate's description has been asking about case files, She'll assume that person is working with me. She'll move to eliminate that threat. And while she's focused on the wrong target, I'll have time to finish gathering evidence and get it to prosecutors who aren't corrupted. You're asking me to lie. To put a target on someone else's back. I'm asking you to help expose a system that's been putting innocent women in cages for profit. My cellmate knew the risks when she agreed to inform. This is just those risks catching up with her. Sarah stands up. No. I'm not going to be responsible for someone getting hurt. I don't care what she's done. Cortez's face hardens. Then you're going to be responsible for 17 women staying in prison for crimes they didn't commit. For Morrison continuing to frame vulnerable people. For Vale and her husband profiting from human misery. She steps closer. You don't get to have clean hands in here, Sarah. You choose which dirt you're willing to wear. Sarah walks toward the door. Stops. Turns back. What happened to Diaz? She asks quietly. Cortez's expression flickers. Just for a moment. Diaz talked to the wrong person. Said too much about her case. That person reported it. Diaz is in isolation now, for her own protection. She'll be transferred to another facility within the week. For her own protection, Sarah repeats. Or to keep her quiet. Both. Sarah leaves the chapel. Returns to her cell. Foster is awake, sitting on her bunk, waiting. How did it go? Foster asks. Sarah looks at her cellmate. Really looks. Sees the tension in Foster's shoulders, the careful neutrality of her expression, the way her hands are folded just like Cortez's hands were folded in the cafeteria that first day. You're Cortez's cellmate, Sarah says quietly. Foster doesn't deny it. Doesn't confirm it. Just watches Sarah with eyes that have seen this moment coming. She's going to sacrifice you, Sarah continues. She's going to make Vale think you're the one asking questions. She's going to let them come after you while she finishes her case. I know, Foster says simply. Then why are you still helping her? Foster stands up. Moves to the small barred window that overlooks the yard. Because 11 years ago, I was convicted of fraud I didn't commit. My public defender told me a plea deal was my best option. 3 years, out in 18 months with good behavior. Seemed reasonable for a crime I didn't do. Except I'm still here. Every time I come up for parole, something happens. A rule violation I didn't commit. A fight I wasn't part of. New charges that appear out of nowhere. Foster turns back to Sarah. Cortez figured out why. The company that uses my labor in the prison factory pays the state per inmate per hour. I'm skilled. Efficient. Valuable. They've been paying officials to keep me here. How many others? In this prison? At least 40. Nationwide? Cortez thinks thousands. Sarah sits on her bunk. The concrete wall is cold against her back. She's still sacrificing you. Your cause might be just, but her methods aren't. You think I don't know that? Foster's voice carries an edge Sarah hasn't heard before. I've known Cortez for 6 years. I know exactly who she is. She's brilliant and ruthless and completely focused on the outcome. She'll burn herself and everyone around her if it means exposing this system. That's why her case will work. Because she's willing to pay any price. Including your freedom. Including my life, if necessary. Sarah lies back on her bunk. Stares at the ceiling. Thinks about Morrison. About Vale. About 17 women in prisons across the state who don't know they're part of a pattern. About Foster, who's accepted her role in Cortez's plan with the resigned calm of someone who stopped believing in happy endings years ago. What if there's another way? Sarah asks. There isn't. What if I visit with Vale, but instead of describing you, I describe someone who doesn't exist? Give her enough detail that she thinks the threat is real, but point her toward a ghost. Foster considers this. Vale will investigate. When she realizes the person you described doesn't exist, she'll know you lied. She'll know you're protecting someone. That makes you the threat. Then I become the target instead of you. That's not better. It's better than doing nothing. Foster sits on the edge of Sarah's bunk. Looks at her with something that might be respect or might be pity. You're new here. You still think there are right answers and wrong answers. You still think if you're clever enough, you can find the solution that doesn't cost anyone anything. Foster shakes her head slowly. There is no clean solution. There's only the one that accomplishes the most good while causing the least damage. And right now, that solution involves me taking the fall so Cortez can finish what she started. I can't accept that. You're going to have to. The lights go out automatically at midnight. Sarah and Foster lie in their bunks in the dark, both awake, both thinking about choices that feel like inevitabilities. At 2:14 a.m., Sarah makes her decision. Vale visits 3 days later. She's exactly what Sarah expected. Expensive suit, sympathetic smile, legal pad filled with notes that are meant to look helpful. They sit across from each other in a small conference room monitored by cameras but no guards. Sarah, Vale begins, I've been reviewing your case. There are some irregularities that concern me. I think we might have grounds for an appeal. Sarah lets Vale talk for 5 minutes. Listens to promises about legal advocacy and wrongful conviction research. Watches Vale's eyes, looking for the moment when the conversation shifts from performance to interrogation. It comes when Vale leans forward and says, "Have you talked to anyone here about your case? Other inmates, perhaps?" This is the moment. Sarah can give Cortez what she wants, describing Foster and setting Vale's attack dogs on the wrong target. Or Sarah can tell Vale the truth, that Cortez is building a federal case and there's nothing Vale can do to stop it. Or Sarah can try her own plan, describing a ghost and becoming the target herself. Sarah chooses something else entirely. Yes, Sarah says. I've talked to several people, including someone who helped me understand that my conviction is part of a pattern. That Linda Morrison has testified against dozens of women. That there's a systematic operation using fraudulent convictions to maintain prison labor numbers for private manufacturing contracts. Vale's expression doesn't change, but her hands go still on the legal pad. That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious crime. Who told you this? The evidence told me. Morrison's testimony in my case referenced banking information she shouldn't have had access to. When I researched her background, I found she'd been a corrections officer here. When I cross-referenced her testimony dates with conviction patterns, I found clusters of cases that matched the same profile as mine. Sarah leans forward. I haven't talked to one inmate about this. I've talked to 7. And we've all filed complaints with the state attorney general's office. It's a lie. Sarah has filed nothing. The 7 inmates don't exist. But Vale doesn't know that. And in the split second before Vale regains control of her expression, Sarah sees the confirmation she needs. Vale isn't here to help. She's here to assess the threat. I see, Vale says carefully. Well, I'll need to review those complaints. If you can give me names. The Attorney General has the names. Of course. Vale closes her legal pad. Stands up. I'll be in touch, Sarah. Thank you for your honesty. After Vale leaves, Sarah sits alone in the conference room for 3 minutes before the guard comes to escort her back to A block. 3 minutes to wonder if she's just made the smartest decision of her life or signed her own death warrant. Foster is waiting in their cell when Sarah returns. You didn't tell her about me. No. You told her something that made her think the threat is much bigger than it is. Yes. Foster sits on her bunk, studying Sarah with new understanding. You just declared war. You know that, right? Vale thinks there's an organized group preparing to expose the system. She's going to respond with everything she has. I know. Cortez is going to be furious. Her entire plan depended on Vale focusing on a single target while Cortez worked in the shadows. You just forced everything into the open. I know that too. Foster almost smiles. You're either very brave or very stupid. Third option, Sarah says. Very tired of waiting for other people to decide my fate. That night, Sarah doesn't sleep. Lies in her bunk waiting for consequences. They come at 4:30 a.m. Guards enter the cell with flashlights and orders. Sarah and Foster are both being moved to administrative segregation. Protective custody, they call it. But both women know what it really is: isolation. Removal from the general population. Neutralization of a threat. Sarah is placed in a cell alone. 6 by 8 feet. Toilet in the corner. Concrete bed with a thin mattress. No window. 23 hours of lockdown per day. 1 hour in a cage they call a recreation area. For 2 weeks, Sarah sees no one except guards delivering meals through a slot in the door. No communication with other inmates. No phone calls. No mail. Just silence and concrete and fluorescent light that never turns off. On day 15, Cortez appears at her cell door. Cortez has been moved to ADSEG 2, but not for protection. For punishment. Sarah can see it in the bruising around Cortez's left eye, the careful way she moves, the exhaustion in her face that goes deeper than lack of sleep. They came after me hard, Cortez says through the door slot. Convinced that I was organizing the complaints you told Vale about. They searched my cell. Found my documentation. Destroyed most of it. Cortez pauses. But not all of it. I had copies hidden in 3 different locations. One of my outside contacts already delivered everything to the FBI. Sarah moves closer to the door. So it's done? It started. The FBI is investigating. Vale and her husband have been subpoenaed. Morrison has been arrested. It'll take months, maybe years to unravel the full network, but it's happening. Cortez's voice drops lower. Because you refused to play it safe. Because you forced everything into the open before they could prepare. Foster? Transferred to a minimum security facility. She'll be processed for early release once the investigation confirms her conviction was fraudulent. Cortez's hand appears through the slot, holding a small folded piece of paper. She wanted me to give you this. Sarah takes the paper. Unfolds it. 4 words in Foster's careful handwriting. You chose right. Thank you. Cortez starts to walk away, then stops. You know what the hardest part about being in here is? It's not the violence or the isolation or the injustice. It's the feeling that nothing you do matters. That you're powerless. That the system is too big and you're too small. She looks at Sarah through the small window in the door. You reminded me that's not true. One person's choice can change everything. Cortez disappears down the corridor. Sarah sits on her concrete bed, holding Foster's note, listening to the sounds of the prison at morning. Doors opening. Guards shouting. Women moving through routines that have been repeated 10,000 times. 3 months later, Sarah is released. The Attorney General's investigation has confirmed that her conviction was fraudulent. Morrison's testimony was paid for by Vale's husband. The public defender who convinced Sarah to take the plea was receiving kickbacks. The judge who sentenced her was part of the network. Sarah walks out of the prison in clothes that feel strange after 14 months of institutional uniforms. The sky is bigger than she remembers. The air smells different. She stands outside the gate for a long moment, adjusting to freedom that doesn't feel quite real yet. A car pulls up. Foster is driving. She's gained weight, cut her hair, looks 10 years younger than she did in their cell. Need a ride? Foster asks. Sarah gets in the passenger seat. They drive in silence for 20 minutes before Foster speaks again. Cortez got out yesterday. Her conviction was overturned too. She's already working with the FBI, identifying other facilities where the same pattern exists. Foster glances at Sarah. She wants to know if you'd be interested in helping. Using your experience. Your perspective. Sarah looks out the window at the landscape passing by. Small towns. Gas stations. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware of the systems operating in the shadows, unaware of the women trapped in those systems. I'll think about it, Sarah says. But she already knows the answer. You don't spend 14 months in a cage without understanding that the walls extend far beyond the prison. That the bars are built from silence and indifference and the comfortable belief that the system works, that innocent people don't get convicted, that justice is blind. The walls are everywhere. And someone has to keep pushing against them. Foster drives. Sarah watches the road. Neither of them says what they're both thinking, that they'll carry the prison with them for the rest of their lives. In their sleep patterns. In their hyper-awareness of exits and authority figures. In the way they'll never quite trust institutions again. But they'll also carry something else. The knowledge that when everything was taken from them, when they had every reason to protect themselves and only themselves, they chose to fight for something bigger. The prison will always be there. In their memories. In their nightmares. In the reflexive way they'll count doors and map escape routes for the rest of their lives. But it doesn't get to be the end of their story. It's just the chapter where they learned what they were capable of when it mattered most. The car continues down the highway. The prison disappears in the rearview mirror. But its echo remains, a reminder that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something you fight for, one impossible choice at a time. Even when the cost is everything you have. Especially then.